Hello friends, hope you're well. Today I have a different purpose for coming out here and making a video, and that purpose is to share what could be happening behind the scenes, the hidden truth of this whole outbreak. So I'm not a scientist or anything, but these days information is so easily accessible and we can do our own research and learn by ourselves that we can find information and we can digest and understand it fully. So what I want to do today is simply to do my part and to pass something on to the few viewers that do follow me. If I have any direct experience, it would be that I took a flight from Baku to Doha and from Doha back here in New Zealand. And there was 7 of us traveling together. A week or so later, there was a report out about all the different flights and whether or not they had anyone with diagnosed COVID-19 on those flights. And sure enough, under my flight, there was one person. I looked briefly at the rest of the list, and the list pretty much had every single flight. Everyone that came back, there was 1 or 2 people, usually just one was the most common number, that had COVID-19. So I had to isolate and do all that stuff for 2 weeks. So this whole virus, first of all, has not been isolated. Nobody anywhere on this planet has isolated the virus responsible for COVID-19. Which brings up a question. What are we testing for? All of these numbers, all of these positives, what are they testing for? The test that's being used is called a PCR test, I believe. And what it's testing for is a genetic material which was found in the lungs of those sick patients which were thought to have COVID-19. So, patients were sick, they tested them, it was flu-like symptoms, the disease, dis-ease, was primarily in the lungs. So, first of all, just double check by yourself. The virus has not been isolated. If this whole thing hasn't been isolated, what are we testing for? Where are all these numbers coming from? So what we're testing for is this genetic material which is present in any human being. Patients in Italy, etc., where the numbers were higher, this still applies all over the world. Patients in hospitals which were dying of lung disease, cancers, etc. Of course, now there's a pandemic, we have to test everybody in the hospital. We're going to find this genetic information. Oh, COVID-19, positive. Do you follow? fatality numbers. If we look at the death rate on the planet, it has not been any higher this year compared to any other year. If there are all these deaths, then there should be at least slightly an increase in the death rate of the world as a whole. No such increase has taken place, because likely on any ordinary death which was due to cancers, diseases, and people passing away in the hospital, the label was put COVID-19. I'm going to link to a few videos which I got most of this information from, and all I'm doing is I'm regurgitating this information. And there's much more in these videos than I'm able to speak about. And again, this is just me doing my part to pass on information to those that are open and willing to accept. Why can't we trust the government? Why can't we trust mainstream media? One of the examples that was brought in an interview that I just watched with a doctor from the US was, I'm sure maybe you've seen that in some of the hospitals they're actually empty, and I recently was in a hospital, nothing to do with COVID-19, and for sure there was nothing going on there. It was more empty than it usually was. My grandpa had heart surgery in that hospital, so I've been there before. I've seen what it's like before, and it was no more busy than from what I remember. In fact, where we went, it was quite empty. So after a doctor had, it was quite a small town somewhere in America, and you'll see this if you watch the link that I'm going to attach. After a doctor noticed that the hospital was completely empty, she thought that she had put a notice out to the public in the community just to reduce some of the levels of fear, panic. And then the next day she gets called up to the CEO's office and gets told to keep her mouth shut. So with all good intentions at heart, just to calm down the masses, this doctor thought to relay the message that the hospitals aren't reflecting, or her personal hospital that she was working at was not a reflection of what's been shown in the mainstream media, with people toppling over, rolling on the floor in China, which, by the way, has already opened its country up again. The lockdown in China is over, from what I've last heard. Yet, we are bombarded in the media of all of these videos, etc., and statements which are there to scare people into staying inside. I was on a plane with 7 other people, friends and colleagues, from Doha. The airplane was full. None of the 7 people which I was with have had any issues with their health. Right at the beginning of the video, I said that the virus hasn't been isolated. So maybe this sounds insane, because why would the whole world close down if there was no threat? But there might be no virus at all, and this is just, I'll let you do your own research. Maybe some other brief things to say. So look into the testing. The testing is all garbage. Look into whether or not the virus has been isolated and identified. look into the fact that after all these months that COVID-19 has been present, the flu has taken more deaths than this COVID-19. So why all the lockdown? Basically, the numbers do not warrant a lockdown, not even close. Another thing that comes to mind that this really brilliant doctor was saying was one of the medical advisors in the States, he released an article into, I think it was New Britain Medical Journal, something like that. And in that, he revealed that the death rate for COVID-19 was 0.1%, which was 1 in 1,000, I believe. And pretty much said that it's comparable to the flu. Then, when he did a press conference alongside with Trump and the gang, days later, his message had completely turned, and it was more of this fear-based information. So this doctor released one message to the medical educated community and a completely different message to the mainstream media via this conference with presidents and other officials. There's something very fishy. And what's happening is fear is ruling the world. And with fear ruling the world, it gives the people sitting at the top an excuse to come in and rule it the way they want. Vaccines. Vaccines are a really big topic. People that don't believe in vaccines are seen as, like almost like flat earthers. They're seen as extremely uneducated. Well, my challenge to you is to go and do some research for yourself and find out how these vaccines are being tested. Take a look at when these vaccines are being implemented. And I can answer that right now. The vaccines are being implemented after the curve for any virus or disease has gone down. So then what they say is, it was the vaccine which helped to halt the disease. I challenge you to look into the spreading of viruses at all. Spanish flu, which killed apparently anywhere from 10 to 90 million people or so in the early 1900s. This experiment is really a game changer, and I'm gonna regurgitate information, but it really follows along with my experience in my own life. Spanish flu, which killed millions and millions and millions of people. At the time, they took 100 test subjects. So 100 people that were healthy and uninfected with the Spanish flu. They ran 3 experiments. First was the swab test. So they swabbed the tongue, nose, eyes, and they put it on a healthy person. Out of the 100 test subjects, 0 got sick. A disease which was killing millions, which was apparently spreading. Tongue, nose, eyes, swab it onto the sick person on the tongue, in the nose. 0 out of 100 people contracted the disease. Okay, so maybe it needs to be something more. So what do? They take, not exactly sure what they used, I forget, but anyway, they took the sick people, they got something, perhaps the same saliva or something, and injected it this time into the uninfected people. How many people out of 100 got sick? 0. Please go and look at this research. I'll try to find something that I can link to make things easier. So after that wasn't enough, they said, okay, something must be going on here. What if it's just close proximity thing? So you have to just do something more natural, have a conversation, breathe on each other. So they pretty much did a CPR sort of thing where they come really close and breathe into each other's mouths. Again, 0 out of 100 test subjects got sick. Coronavirus, or COVID-19, apparently came from a bat. There is no information, there is no evidence anywhere that suggests that a virus from one animal can transfer to another. In fact, this doctor was saying that in his studies in medical school, that it was one of the things that they are taught, that you cannot have a virus come from one species to another. So if a virus is not transmittable, what is causing all these pandemics to break out? What is causing things like the Spanish flu, SARS, all the coronaviruses, including this COVID-19? And one promising or likely theory that I've seen is electromagnetic technology. Right before the Spanish flu was the introduction of, I believe it was the radio waves, and after the introduction of radio waves, or this new electromagnetic frequency that was broadcast all over the planet now, all these people got sick. After radio waves came some other technology, perhaps there was radar, and after radar got introduced, another outbreak. What technology was released right before the outbreak of COVID-19? 5G. So you do your own research and you see what you find, because look at all the past pandemics and outbreaks on the planet and search up at which point in time was there a new release in 5G or 4G, 3G, microwaves, radio waves, and you'll see that following each great release of new technology which produces electromagnetic frequencies, electromagnetic fields, there has been a pandemic which has killed. Let's consider the fact that if we talk about this with a neighbor, with someone mainstream, and especially with someone cowering in fear, imagine the consequences. So it's very important that we find the right people and we relay this information in the correct way. It's very easy to talk about it aggressively through filming yourself online. But if you're talking person to person, you have to be very careful, very gentle. Did you hear the news? Someone in America said that the hospital was empty and was told to be quiet about it by the CEO. They're hiding something. That's just an example of how you could approach it. I did feel like I had one more piece. Exosomes. the visual representation of what the coronavirus, of what COVID-19 looks like, is identical not only visually but characteristically to exosomes. Exosomes are released primarily in your lungs when one is sick, and these exosomes have been found to be helpful with excreting toxic material, and they're literally identical to what has been labeled as the COVID-19 virus, coronavirus. So perhaps I'll leave it there. That's plenty of information. I'll do my best to link some good material, but again, let's do our part. Let's at least begin to spread this information, and it's already been spread. David Icke, who some see as completely insane, and again the mainstream sees him as insane. So I encourage you to do a little bit of research to uncover the truth of what's going on, and you don't need to look much farther than, has this virus been isolated, and how are they testing for it? And if there is no virus, then what are all these potential vaccines even for? I encourage you to just do a little bit of research, find out some information, and to share your findings with others. Intelligently, not just, completely, it's this. It's always important. Nobody knows. I don't know the truth. I don't know exactly what's happening. But I simply know that I was on the flight, I was in the hospital, and none of the 7 people that I was with have had any symptoms of sickness. Stay away from TV, stay away from the news. It's all bullshit. As I've mentioned before, all the media companies, all the television channels, it's all linked up to a very few companies who control what information is released to the public. So, some points to ponder. I hope you're well. Go out in nature. Don't stay cooped up at home in a lockdown. Breathe some fresh air. And use it as a time to rest and to find yourself deeper. Use it as a time to move forward spiritually. One more thing that came to my mind was that while everything is in lockdown, 5G is still being allowed to be brought out into cities. How is that a necessity? How is that something essential? It's another red flag. It should trigger another false alarm. Why is taking 5G, is continuing its installation with all those towers, with Elon Musk putting up all those satellites into space? How is that okay? Despite everything else being locked down, despite all other businesses being shut down, and obviously that's going to impact the economy. So anyway, just one point that I should have mentioned before. Bye bye.